Hi there, and welcome to this week's version of Career Insights. As always, please do comment and let us know where you're joining us from. Today, I am joined by Michael Moran, our CEO, and Joe Green, one of our career coaches, to talk a bit about elevator pitches. So hopefully be of interest to lots of people and how they can be used in a variety of different ways. So as always, please do always like, comment and ask questions throughout, just so that we can make it as interactive and useful as possible for you. So after the session today, we're doing something a little bit different. We're just going to be hanging around a bit to answer any other job related questions you might have. So we've had some feedback that it would be good to have kind of a general chat. So hopefully if there's a few people around and want to hang around afterwards, that will be great. So welcome to Michael and Joe. And let's go with our very first question, which is, what is an elevator pitch? So Michael, over to you.
Thanks, Sarah, and welcome everybody. What I'm going to start by saying is, I don't think most people understand the significance of an elevator pitch. It's probably one of the most important things to have and to be able to recite it at ease and with confidence when you're meeting anybody as part of your job search. So I don't want to give you an example. I truly had a client who it's probably the best example I've got of an elevator pitch. This gentleman, his wife had got a very senior job with an investment bank in London. Actually, she followed the COO, and he was a Canadian lawyer, and he came over to the UK and obviously was looking for a job. Not easy for a Canadian lawyer, but he had a connection with the Bradman brothers, very wealthy individuals, developers from his time in Toronto, and he happened to meet one of them in One Canada Square, which most of you will know is a 500-story building, I think, or 50-story building. And what he did was, very cleverly, he said to this gentleman, as he was about to get into the lift, and literally stuck his toe, "I'm not sure if you remember me, but I worked with you, or I did some work with you in Toronto." And by the time they got to the bottom of the elevator, this gentleman said, "Okay, I know now you're looking for a job. I appreciate truly your elevator pitch. Let's get time in the diary." So an elevator pitch, put simply, is a very succinct resume of where you've come from, why you're now looking, and most importantly, what you're looking for in your job search. Over to you, Joe.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Michael. The elevator pitch is probably the most important thing in your job search. And I always think of it as, you know, a conversation starter or your own personal advertisement. So in the same way as when you're flicking through a magazine or a newspaper, certain headlines catch your attention. If you're interested, you then go on to read the article. And it's exactly the same with you presenting yourself. So your elevator pitch has got to be your own personal headlines, and it's the opportunity to really make that good first impression.
Brilliant, thank you. So we are going to ask some questions a bit later about how you go on about creating one and those kind of things. But before that, we talked a little bit yesterday about the psychology of how people take in information and how critical it is that you present things well. So could you just expand a little bit on that? So Joe, do you want to start with that?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is whenever you're speaking to anyone, whether it's on the phone or face-to-face or Zoom, however you're connecting, you've really got to know your audience. And I think that's the most important thing. So it's the same as advice I would give in an interview situation, is really listen to the other person first. If you are talking to someone who's from the same sector as you, then obviously there are certain things you know you can say, certain buzzwords or hooks that they're going to be interested in. But if you're talking to somebody who is from a completely different sector, they're not going to need that sort of information. So you've got to understand who your audience is and adapt the information you're giving according to them. And you'll very quickly see whether they are taking in that information or not. And I think we all know that even in interview situations, in any situation, people tend to make a judgment or get a first impression within the space of a few seconds. So it's very, very important to be reading the person, your audience, to understand if they're taking in what you're saying.
Excellent, thank you. Anything to add to that, Michael?
Yes, I mean, in terms of the psychology of how we take information, and it's fairly well researched that actually about 70% of what we're taking is what we see. And indeed, the content of what I'm talking to you now about, probably less than 7%. And the difference being the tone at which I say it. So in landing messages, and remember you're trying to do it in a short period of time, critically is that ability to present yourself, I say, with confidence, with passion, because that's what people are going to remember. And sort of, you know, the best elevator pitch in the world in terms of content won't land unless you can deliver it with passion and enthusiasm.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, that's very interesting stuff. So on to the how do you actually go about creating one? So Jo, do you want to make a start with that?
Yeah, I mean, there are obviously there's sort of 4 parts to it, really. You've got to say who you are, what you do, what's special about you, your unique selling points, and what your goals and ambitions are. So I personally would, if I was doing it myself, or when I've done it, I've used the on our career portal, you can build your own elevator pitch there. But if you haven't got that, just literally doing something on your phone, just rehearsing it, and then I would practice it in front of friends. But that I would follow those sort of 4 points. You know, who you are, what it is you do, what's special about it, what makes you different, and where you are at the moment in your career, what you want to do with that.
Okay, excellent. Michael?
I sort of want to reiterate what Jo says. I have a sort of 3 stages. Mine says is where I've come from in, say, 2 to 3 sentences, my career to date, why I'm now looking, and then the mass majority, maybe 3 to 5 sentences around what I'm looking for. But Jo's right. What you're trying to do is create a memory, and a memory for the right reason, being memorable. So the more you can sort of tweak it, so within some level, whether it's humor, whether it's something that's a picture you're painting, because obviously you want people to remember you. And particularly if you're talking to recruiters, the odds are having lots of these conversations. Mm-hmm. So the question is how you make yourself stand out from the rest of the crowd.
Yeah, I think on that point, Michael, it's about avoiding the usual jargon that people use in the profile on a CV and things like that about, you know, I'm a good team player. If someone says to me they're a good team player, that goes straight over the top of my head, doesn't mean anything. But if someone actually paints a little picture and says, I always have the reputation at work of being the person that everyone comes to for help, I kind of can visualize it and I remember it. So painting pictures is a very important thing to do, rather than just, you know, textbook language.
It's that old adage, a picture's worth 1,000 words.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So in terms of the duration, how long should you be planning for your elevator pitch to be?
I think we had a slight disagreement here, didn't we? So
yes.
I think, Jo, you thought it was less than a minute, and I think it can be up to 3 minutes. It's short, but you know, ultimately you've still got to land this message. So I'm 3 minutes. Jo, what about you?
Less than 3 minutes, but again, I'll go back to what I said at the beginning. It so totally depends on who you're talking to and what the situation is. So if you're in a, I don't know, some sort of social event, a networking conference, for example, you don't want to bore the pants off the other person by going into too much detail. You just want to tempt them to be interested, to ask a bit more. So you might actually break up your elevator pitch in a conversational way.
And of course, yeah. Well, I was going to point out, Jo, that you're right and I'm wrong, because LinkedIn have introduced this very exciting new feature, but that's only 30 seconds.
That is 30 seconds.
Do you want to talk about the new feature they've introduced?
Yeah, so you carry on, Jo, you go first.
I was just going to say, on that time thing, though, I did it after our conversation yesterday. I tried to do a 30-second pitch for LinkedIn. I couldn't do it.
It's hard. It's really hard.
Really, really hard.
Yeah. Okay, I will talk about that in just a second. I've just added the comment up that Jill's just added. So also add in phrases about how you make a difference, what you are known for, what you enjoy, etc. but make sure it doesn't sound like a shopping list of what you do. So yeah, that's a good point. Thank you, Jill. Yes, so the cover story on LinkedIn, it's relatively new. It's been around for probably a couple of months for most people. Most people, I think, still are probably not aware that it's there. But when you're on LinkedIn, if you see someone who has an orange circle around their profile picture, that means then that they have a cover story, and you can click on it and watch that video. So it's 30 seconds long, and you'll notice also that it silently plays in the frame for about 3 seconds, I think. So it looks a bit like one of those Harry Potter videos, you know, in the hall and things like that. So it's quite cool technology. So if you're going to record it, then the advice is to do it on your phone, and then upload it to a site where you can add subtitles. So that just then makes it accessible for everybody. But also the stats show that 80% of people don't actually listen to sound on LinkedIn. So you really want to have subtitles so that people are getting that message. And then you can upload it to your phone, and then it will be visible for everyone to see. So you have 30 seconds, as Michael mentioned. And as Joe said, it's very hard to get information in that time. So you really need to practice and really be sure about what it is you want to kind of talk about. And think about your background as well. So we were talking about this yesterday. We have a client who is Spanish and based in Spain, but actually he has done his video in English because for him a huge selling point is that he's bilingual, and he wants his Spanish audience to see him speaking in English. But he's also picked his location very well. It's a lovely area with big office blocks in the background. So it's a really, really good video, I think. So I think you can get over a lot in 30 seconds. It's not just you talking. So anything to add? Have either of you set up your videos yet?
No, as I say, I tried to do it after our conversation yesterday, and I've only had a couple of goes at it, but I found it really difficult to do it in 30 seconds. Yeah, very difficult.
As yet, I've not done it. I am going to do it, so that's a bit of a commitment. I suppose I'm still in two minds, and so I had this debate when my client asked me around should he use a cover story, because I think it probably depends on the sector you're applying for. You know, I can imagine if you're applying for financial service, professional services, and the audience, dare I say it, is going to be old school 40s, 50s. I don't think they're going to look at a video on LinkedIn. A little bit like these sort of people also not that well, not used to using photos on CVs. On the other hand, if you're applying for a digital role in the media, advertising, and a much more, dare I say, useful, vibrant audience, I think it's essential. So I think it's a bit like horses to courses. It'll be interesting to see how it develops and whether it does become a sort of feature that everyone does. The other sort of downside, I suspect, Sarah, is that recruiters, you know, will they actually use it as a way of identifying candidates? Because at the moment, that's not likely to happen. But at least the good news is, as we all know, and if anyone's done any recruiting, when you've looked at the CV and then the person walks through the door and they don't look like their CV, i.e., so at least recruiters can see what you look like, which I think, whether we like it or not, is an important issue around selection.
I think so, and I think it also goes back to the whole picture. And you know, so many people have got pictures from 10 years ago or whatever on LinkedIn, and they're very formal, and things have changed. People do tend to have much more casual pictures now, so it is important to keep it updated as well. So much like you should maybe have a new headshot once a year, I guess, I think you probably need to be updating your cover story relatively frequently as well, because things change, don't they?
Can I ask a question here, Sarah, though? What do you do for LinkedIn when you've got several different profiles that you want to get across?
Yeah, I guess that's the difficult thing, isn't it? So, I mean, for me, obviously, I'm not job hunting, but I use mine to kind of talk about the fact that I've got a portfolio career. So I'll say I do career coaching, I do LinkedIn coaching, I've got a holiday let, I'm a charity trustee. So I'm using it to talk about those things very generally, and then hopefully people will go on and have a bit more of a read. So I guess the first thing is to work out why you're using it, and then try to get that across. So I suppose if you didn't necessarily know exactly what job you were looking for, then that's quite difficult to record a really tailored cover story. So I think then you would probably be talking about your key skills rather than I'm looking for this type of role.
Right.
Does
So
that lead us nicely? Sorry, Joe, go on.
I was just going to say, does that almost sort of link to the, you know, competency-based or functional-based CV?
Yes.
You're selling yourself on your key skills rather than your last job.
Absolutely, yes, yeah. I've just put up another question from a comment from Jill, and then I'll go back to our question. So Jill says, I always suggest 2 pictures, the summary of and the full one for the 3 minutes, so you can answer the question, tell me about yourself at interview, I guess, and the summaries for a quick intro. So yes, that's one of our kind of comments in a second, actually, about different types of uses for it. So we've talked about how long it should be, when would you use it, so we've sort of touched on that. Anything to expand on that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously in a social situation, in a networking conference, but also when you're picking up the phone to a search firm, for example, you've got to have a very clear message that you're giving, because they're not going to stay on the phone and chat to you until they want that hook when you make that initial phone call. So certainly in that situation, I don't know. I think also it's going back to what I was saying at the beginning about using it and adapting it to your audience, because if you're at, I don't know, a social event, a party, for example, nobody particularly necessarily wants to know all about you and your background. But if they do say to you, oh, you know, I'm a lawyer, what do you do? Then it is an open invitation to briefly say, yeah, I'm a career coach, this is what I do, this is, you know, the area I work in. And then, you know, it becomes more part of the conversation, but it's still sort of stored in your mind as the key points you want to get across. Yeah. And so yeah, I think you've got to have it there for any situation, really.
Yes. Yeah. And we talked about it linking to interviews as well, didn't we? So that tell me about yourself question, that links quite nicely to the elevator pitch. Yeah, okay. So Liz has just made a comment to say, interesting discussion on the cover story and the key point about the importance of deciding why you want to engage in this way. So yeah, I think that's it. It's really, you need to think about it before you do it. I think that's definitely the thing here. So kind of linked here. So can the elevator pitch link to the CV profile statement? So the kind of the statement at the top of your CV, and also the about section on LinkedIn. So Michael, do you want to start with that one?
Yeah, so I'm thinking that if you are actively job seeking, your CV profile statement effectively should be your elevator pitch. You know, so and reverting to the last question, I mean, Joe's comment, you should be using it all the time. And I can think of one client who got a job as a result of standing on a touchline watching his son play rugby, with someone said next to him, "So what do you do?" AKA, I can roll out my elevator pitch. And so I think familiarity with it is important. One slight digression, Sarah, if I may. So to get people to the point of, once you produce your elevator pitch, you should always test it. And what I mean by test it, talk to 2 people you know and trust very well, roll out the elevator pitch, and then say to them three questions. 1, what have you learned? AKA, have you landed the message you intended to land? Secondly, can I achieve this? Because there's no point putting an elevator pitch out there if people don't see you as, I don't know, the next future CEO. And thirdly, how did I come across? Was I too relaxed? Was I too in your face, etc.? So I do think there's quite a piece around preparing the elevator pitch before you take it to market. But then returning to your question, absolutely make use of LinkedIn to advertise your elevator pitch, because ultimately that's what's going to get you this job, isn't it? This is what I'm looking for.
Yes, yeah, and that about section, or the summary section on LinkedIn, it is essentially that is about selling yourself. So ideally you would want to structure that with the kind of the top part about what you're looking for next, so making sure you're naming the roles you're looking for, if you know that, the skills that you've got that relate to that particular role, any keywords, because when a recruiter runs a search, you want them to find you for the role you're looking for, not the one that you've just been doing. So if you just go into a history and you're maybe looking for a promotion, you're not going to get found unless you talk about what it is you're looking for. So have that at the top, and then beneath that a bit more information about your history and how you've got to where you are now. So if you're not searching openly, then that does make that quite difficult. But I think you need to try and be creative about getting those keywords in for the next role that you're looking for. So top part about what you're looking for, middle part about what you're looking for next, and then at the bottom you can add any other keywords that you've maybe not been able to include naturally in a paragraph.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's funny, in sort of any interview training that we do, the one question that people always ask me is, what do I say when people say, tell me about yourself?
Yes.
And it's the one question people seem to be very uncertain of. And I never quite understand, because clearly it's one thing you really can think about and really can practice. And it is basically the elevator pitch.
Yes.
It's that hook, that headline that are going to get people interested in you to ask more.
Yeah, and so that leads on to the next one. So how can you practice? So there's obviously lots of different ways. So Jo, do you want to talk about some of the ways you could practice?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, obviously on the 1080 career portal, we've got there's a section where you can actually build your own elevator pitch. It takes you through each of the 3 or 4 stages. But I mean, if you haven't got that, of course, you can just do it on Zoom or on your phone, and just practice and watch yourself back and listen to yourself. Because as Michael was alluding to earlier, the psychology of how people take information in, it's very much about where you put emphasis on the words, how upbeat you sound, how much energy you're putting into it, and whether you're enthusiastic or not. So you can hear your own voice, and that's sometimes comes as a bit of a shock to hear your own voice, but you need to do that, and practice, and failing all that, stand in front of the mirror and do it.
Yeah,
while you're emptying the dishwasher, walk around the kitchen, say it out loud, and until you feel really comfortable with everything.
Yeah, and then
go on.
I was going to say, going back to Michael's point earlier about asking other people for feedback, you can record yourself on your phone and send a video message. You can record yourself on LinkedIn and send a video message that way, and send it to people you kind of know and trust to give you honest feedback on how you're coming across. They may well come up with things of, why haven't you talked about this? So it's really good in terms of feedback for your practice and how you're actually talking, but also the content. And then also on LinkedIn, as you mentioned, the tell me about yourself question, if you go to the interview prep section, you can there record yourself on video answering that question, and LinkedIn will give you some AI on how fast you're speaking, how many filler words you're using. So if you're saying and a lot, it will tell you that. So it's really good, and it will tell you if you're sounding too monotone and things like that as well. So there's some great feedback options on there. So Michael?
Well, I was going to reiterate Joe's point around practice. In my experience, the clients are too self-conscious. We'll do the work on the elevator pitch, and they'll practice once, 2 or 3 times. That's nowhere near enough. You really need, set yourself a target. I am going to take this elevator pitch to 50 or 100 people. And therefore, the more you practice, the better you get at it. And coming back to what I said earlier around, it's about how we see you giving that information, not what we're hearing you. It's really, really important. And I can't stress enough that this is something that if you can deliver that confidently, that this is what I am, this is what I want to be, you're much more likely to get the job than if you're nervous, you're stuttering, you've not quite thought it through, the words don't mix. And as you say, LinkedIn's very brutal in occasionally, isn't it? So in terms of it's telling you how you come over to people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really good feedback. Really good.
It is really good. Yeah, yeah. And I suppose the other way you could practice, if you are interested in this, is joining local networking groups. So, or it doesn't have to be local now, can it be anywhere? So typically at the start of networking groups on the online ones, they will get you to introduce yourself. So that's a really good way of actually talking through your elevator pitch to people that you might not know. So that's quite good. Okay, so can you use this in an interview somehow? So Jo, so your elevator pitch.
Yeah, absolutely. It's what I was saying before, that the initial opening question at interview is often tell me about yourself, or it might be, do you want to briefly talk me through your CV or something like that. So that in itself is the slightly more extended version of your elevator pitch. But you might at that stage not want to give all of it, because you haven't listened to what the interviewers had to say yet. So you've got to have it in your mind, and these are all the points you want to get across, but not necessarily all in one go, all at the beginning.
Yeah. So all that preparation will pay off somehow during the interview.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Anything to add to that one, Michael?
Well, additionally, it enables you to control the direction in which the interview is going. So, you know, it enables you to tell the things I want to talk about at the first instance, because almost certainly having given the chance to tell them about yourself, that will be the lead question that the interview will then follow up on. I'm a great believer also in leaving a hook at the end of elevator pitch, which is, you know, do you want to know more about my time, or have I given you a succinct description of my career to date? Again, a way of engaging the interviewer, but going down a path that you want to go down.
Yeah, good. We've kind of loosely touched on this one. Is it a good idea to have a few different versions of your elevator pitch? So, Michael, you want to start?
Absolutely. Joe said at the outset, know your audience. If, for example, you've got a two-pronged job search strategy, A, say to investment banks, B, to consultants selling into investment banks, you've got to tailor the elevator pitch to meet that audience. So absolutely.
Great. Okay. Joe, anything else to add to that?
Yeah, I can't think of anything to add to that. The only thing I would be sort of a note of caution, though, is you don't want to be giving out mixed messages. So you've got to be, if you are going for more than one sort of role, you've got to be very clear who you're giving those messages to. It's all about mixed messages. You've got to keep it very clear in your mind who you're talking to and which bit you're trying to sell. As I said earlier, you know, some people are going to be more interested in more detail. So in my own case, you know, if I was talking to someone from HR, they'd have a lot of understanding of the things that I do. If I was talking to someone who'd never heard of what a career coach was, you'd just try and find the language that they would relate to, self-marketing, interview skills, etc., etc. So you do have definitely several versions, I think.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay. So just a bit of a summary statement here. So we're really talking about linking everything together. So from the elevator pitch, you've got your conversation starters, the pitch itself, CV profile statement, the about section on LinkedIn, cover story on LinkedIn, and interview. So you need to have some sort of consistency between them all, and the prep for the elevator pitch is going to help you in all of those things. So, Michael, can you share a good example of an elevator pitch?
We've been looking forward to this question, haven't we, Sarah? If I was looking for a job, this is what I would say. And you never know, of course, as a result of this, I may be looking for a job. I'm a HR professional. I've worked both in the public and the private sector. I moved into operations management in financial services. I got myself an MBA, and for the last 15 years, I've been running career coaching businesses. What I'm looking for is to be CEO of a medium-sized human capital consultancy. I want it to have rapid growth. I want it to be applying technology, and I want it to be acquired in 3 to 5 years, because then I will make myself £1 million. That's my memorable statement, so you'll remember me. I'm going to make £1 million. How's that sound, Sarah?
Very good, thank you. So it's good at the beginning with your intro to, you've got public sector, private sector, HR, financial services, career coaching. So you kind of covered all of that really quickly, but I've obviously remembered it all, so that's all good. Great that you got in about the MBA and that you want to make your $1 million.
Yeah.
Very good.
Memorable.
Yeah. Yeah. What about you, Joe? Any feedback from Michael?
Well, I'd give you the job, Michael, definitely.
Creep.
I'd employ you. No, I mean, you did. You got a lot in there. I didn't time it. But I don't know. What was it? A minute maybe?
I'd say it was less than a minute, I would say.
It was less than a minute.
Yeah.
But you did manage to get a lot of points in there. I think I remembered most of them, but that's, you know, I'm probably a bit biased because I know you. So it's an interesting exercise to try and do it with someone who doesn't know you so well, or maybe a friend, for example, who only knows you as a pal and not as a, you know, as a colleague or work associate. But yeah, that's good.
Yeah, no, it is. And I think if I was someone that hadn't known, I would probably ask a bit about public sector versus private sector or something like that. So I think there were enough hooks in there to make me want to ask a bit more. So, which is what you want, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so as a quick reminder, if you are a 1080 client, then we do have a video with all the elements of elevator pitches on our website, which actually I think that's probably available to everyone, whether you're a client or not, isn't it? But also we have got the elevator pitch, which is on our portal, which is for clients, which helps you to build that. So please do let us know if you want to see that. And just to end this part of the session, top tip to leave with. So Jo, what's your kind of top tip for people on elevator pitches?
Know your audience, be confident, and smile.
Okay, great, excellent. And Michael?
Practice it, practice it, practice it.
Okay, brilliant. Very good. Okay. So next week, I'm going to be back here again talking to Jill and Alison, who have both been on before, and we're going to be talking about tips for over 50s looking for work. So there's been quite a lot of talk about this on LinkedIn, and I think that Liz has been quoted in a couple of articles about this, which is why we thought it would be an interesting topic to talk about. So that's us for today on elevator pitches, and we will, as I said at the beginning, just be staying online for a bit longer to answer any other questions that might come through. So please do ask away. I think there's about 15 people watching at the moment, so if you have any questions relating to job search, then please do add them. So whilst we are waiting in anticipation, in case we get questions, anything you want to talk about, Michael? Key topics at the moment? Or?
I mean, I encourage people to ask questions. There's no such thing as a silly question. I think the job market's starting to take off again, so the signs are encouraging. I suppose the thing I think a lot of clients struggle with it is this sort of concept of building a network that's going to feed me the job opportunities, and it's a little bit like not practicing your elevator pitch. I think people are naturally shy and reticent asking for help. But so the thing here is, do not be afraid to ask for help, because it's one way of making yourself memorable for the right sort of reasons.
Yeah, that's good, definitely. What about you, Jo? Have you noticed any change in the job market?
Yeah, I have actually. What I've noticed, and I know we had a talk in on this a few weeks ago, informational interviews. I'm actually sort of supporting one of my sons at the moment with a bit of job search, and actually getting him to look at a company, look at who works there, look at their backgrounds of the people who do the similar job that he'd like to do, where they've studied, what they've done, what qualifications they've got, and then approaching them for a chat. And it's amazing the response he's had. Really, really very encouraging. So that's, I think really it's good, about having, it's about having the guts to go out there and approach people direct. And I'm finding direct approaches are working pretty well at the moment.
Yeah, that's really good to hear. And I think that whole informational interview was relatively, although it's not a new concept, I think maybe the name of it's quite new. It's quite new to me. But yeah, I think it's definitely really powerful. Lots of people I know are kind of going down that route now. So we've got a couple of comments coming through. So someone saying, great session. Michael's pitch was a great example of keeping it concise and memorable. So there you go, Michael. Feedback from someone anonymous. Okay, so we've got a question here from Ada Sumbo. Hopefully I've pronounced that correctly. How easy is it to get a HR volunteering position other than online in a bid to get into the labour market? I have HR experience and currently rounding up my masters. Thank you. So, I mean, totally randomly, I do know someone in Oxford who is looking for someone to do a HR volunteering position for 6 weeks. So I can send that on to you if that's of interest. But in general, have you got any views on this, Michael?
I haven't. I spoke this time last week to the Westminster Business School, to the masters, and one of the key things I think of getting into HR, having got a qualification, is to do so by volunteering. And let me come back to the point that Joe just made, and it's sort of having the confidence to reach out to people and say, I mean, the great news about LinkedIn, you can almost ask anybody. So that, tell them about yourself and say, can I come in for 6 weeks? Is there a project I can do for you? And if you ask people, or again, get your network on message, and almost everybody works in an organization of some sort in your network, I suggest. They'll probably have some sort of HR person there. Again, get them to approach on your behalf. Can I volunteer? So don't be shy. Use your network and absolutely identify opportunities for you to volunteer. And it's definitely the first step on the road as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I agree, definitely. So she said here, when you say direct, you mean face-to-face online. So I think this was relating back to your point, Joe, about the informational interview. So I guess it would be online in this occasion, but directly messaging those people, I suppose.
Yeah, both. So the good news about LinkedIn is if you've got a connection, you can email people. So absolutely. But equally, if you've got I go back to your network. She was at the session at Westminster. So
there you go.
If you've got someone's phone number, call them, ask them, text them. The worst they can say to you is thank you, but no. That's the worst thing they can say to you.
Yeah, so, absolutely.
Joe, I don't know what you think. If you don't ask, you don't get. And given that such a high percentage of jobs go as a result of a networking introduction, and certainly if you're new to the job market, this is a very positive step to take. What do you think, Joe?
Yeah, absolutely. And what I'd advise Edisumbo, if I've said that name right, is do you know anyone else who's doing that? And finding out how they got it, how they went about it, is quite a useful way. And as I said earlier, I'd go back to LinkedIn. If you identified, I don't know, half a dozen, a dozen companies that you'd really like to work for, somewhere you'd feel passionate about an HR volunteering role, be it in a charity sector or technology, whatever you're interested in, look at that company, look at the people who work there. At the top, it will tell you what school they've been educated at or what university they've been at. And you might flick through and see that half a dozen of them have been at the same university as you, which would be a great way of going in, finding somebody, messaging them via LinkedIn if you haven't got their email, and just saying, I really like the look of what you've done. I'd love to be able to do the same thing. Would you be prepared to give me a 5-minute telephone call just to give me some advice as to how to go about doing it?
Yeah, definitely. And it does really work. I have had a client that moved to Canada and did exactly that. The company she wanted to work for, it was an employed role rather than a volunteering role, but she identified the company, found someone that went to the university that she went to, admittedly 20 years beforehand. But I said, just message him anyway, which she did. And he ended up introing her to the company. She got the role. So absolutely make the use of any connections you possibly can. So Helen's just saying, yes, the worst people can do is say no. I've had to learn to overcome my fear of no when I became self-employed. If you don't ask, you don't get. Definitely. Definitely. So that was a great question. Thank you. And I will contact you afterwards to let you know the person in Oxford that's looking for a 6-week HR volunteer. So that would be pretty amazing if that worked out.
And going back to Westminster, as an HR program, they've got a very strong alumni. So ask the course tutors for access to the alumni list. Check it out on LinkedIn and post it out there. Because again, they've been in a situation that you've been in, and we know people like to help people.
Yes, definitely. So another anonymous comment, pitch with passion. Someone who comes across excited and passionate about a role leaves a much better impression, in my opinion, than someone with a slicker pitch who delivers it in a monotone. So, yeah, and that can definitely be hard to do. So, yeah, it goes back to practice, doesn't it? definitely. So yeah, going back to the job market, I think things do seem to be picking up. I know I've definitely got clients that are landing roles much quicker again now. So I've had one client that's been 5 weeks from first meeting to actually being offered the role, which was brilliant. Another one that was 6 weeks, and both in organisations that they really wanted. So they've been highly targeted with their approaches, and getting through the interviews quite quickly. So it's really good to see that whole process seems to have sped up again for some.
That's interesting, Sarah, because what I would say, another thing I've noticed, is that organisations do seem to be putting many more interviews in before selection. Now, I don't know what you think, Joe, but it just, I think whereas before maybe 3 or 4, we can well get into almost double figures. I don't know, in the past, people like Goldman's always did lots of interviews, but I get a sense that, and that's the other one is around giving presentations or giving a business plan. They seem to want a lot more upfront from candidates than they did 2-3 years ago. What do you think, Joe?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, I think my record was one investment bank that will remain nameless, who put one of my clients through 17 interviews. But that was, he did get the job, but it was more about meeting the team. Not every interview was a grueling process. It was actually getting to know everyone in the team, and that's why there were so many. And obviously now so many interviews are being done online. That's a slightly, it has changed things dramatically, because if you want to meet your team, you probably will have to do quite a few one-to-one things on Zoom or Skype or however they want to do it. I think the clients I've worked with recently have moved relatively quickly. I haven't noticed a big slowdown at all.
No. That's good.
So, most of the clients I'm working with, it's taking them about the average length of time, which for me has always been sort of 2 to 3 months.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I mean, my 2 clients, I think the first one, she had 2 interviews, and the second, he had 4, but they were all very quick. So kind of an intro one, and so that's good to hear. So I can still see there's lots of people watching. So if anyone does have any other questions, please do ask them. But if not, we'll probably end in a few minutes. So anything else you wanted to talk about, Michael?
Nothing else I want to talk about in terms of job seeking at the moment. Let's go back to cover stories and sort of making the most of LinkedIn, because I think this piece around standing out is quite important. And those who are at Westminster heard me talk about MacGuffins. Do you know what a MacGuffin is, Joe or Sarah?
I certainly don't.
No.
And Joe, given your background on the stage, you probably have come across it. What it is, apparently, in both either theatre or in a film, it's an event or some item that sort of sequences what's coming next. So it's a memorable point, and it makes you think about what's going to happen next. And so I've used it slightly, saying that when you're applying for a job, you need to have your own MacGuffin. So when people meet you, they remember you. So those who are at Westminster will see I was wearing my red kickers last week, and they're my MacGuffin. It makes people remember you. So whether it's a fancy bow tie or a hairstyle, but try to have something that people remember. It doesn't have to be an item you're wearing. It can be, for example, things you've done in the past. So people have done a bungee jump, or say with you with your paddleboard. Because this piece comes back to, we remember pictures of people better than we do words. So again, in terms of interview technique or an elevator pitch, if you can build something in that gives you that level of making you memorable, you're much more likely to get the call back.
Yeah, that's true. That's really true. And it's different people remember different things about you, don't they? So I guess that's all about context and making sure it's relevant to that person. It goes back to that point that I made a while ago on the interviews, where somebody had found out their interviewer liked Star Wars, so they had a Star Wars screensaver on their phone or something like that, which then sparked conversation. So that could be quite useful. I'm not sure what that noise is.
That's probably our power heater.
Okay.
Water heater.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. So yeah, absolutely. With cover stories, it's yeah, making yourself stand out for the right reasons, being prepared and practicing and doing lots of takes before you do it. In fact, I did think about having a bit of an outtake video of mine because there were so many that I just started laughing. But
yeah, that's a great idea. I mean, and I know you use cartoons as a way of portraying yourself on LinkedIn. All these, and if you think for a minute like a recruiter, I'm sort of on LinkedIn. I'm seeing. I put a few keywords in, and what's coming out are a lot of people looking the same. Very smart, well presented, lots of good CVs. But by the time I've looked at 10 or 20, I can guarantee you it'll be the one that looks different is the one I'm going to spend more time looking at. So the more, and it's definitely true on CVs, if 60, 70 CVs coming through, and I've got to do a sift exercise, and I'm, ones I want to see, the ones I don't want to see, I'm looking at them for a very short period of time. I absolutely know if I see something that's not like the others, I'm definitely going to look at it. I might still put it in the other pile, but I've spent more time looking at it. So anything around making yourself more memorable is to be encouraged.
Yeah, but with one tiny note of caution, though, is not to be too gimmicky. You do want to stand out. And going back to what you're saying, Michael, if I'm looking at a whole pile of CVs, I will admit here quite openly, I often look at the interests first, and not everybody puts things on there. And it does tell you more about a person, and it does make them more memorable. But just be careful what you're remembered for.
Okay, so two quick stories to finish on that. So you're right. So one, a career coach approached me for a job to work with 1080, and I looked at Jodas's interest, and it said he was a stand-up comedian. So I saw him. I was really glad. And the second one, I had a client who, on the bottom of his interest, said, "And in my part-time, I wrestle alligators." So I said to him, "I don't think that's a good idea. I know you're trying to make memorable, but he did say, well, I used it the other week, Michael, and somebody told me the only reason they saw me was because in my part-time I wrestle alligators." He didn't wrestle alligators, of course, but again, to get people's attention. But the point's well made, Joe. You've got to be memorable for the right reasons.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. Well, okay, so thank you everyone that's still watching. There are still a few people watching, so thank you for joining. We, as I said, we'll be back next week with Jill and Alison to talk about job hunting tips for over 50s. I'm sure they're going to be relevant for everybody, but just because we've seen quite a lot written about this recently. So thanks again, Joe and Michael, and see you next week.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.